Prince Asiel Ben Israel, the late great ambassador of our community.
Yep, you could have been there. You could have been recording.
Yeah. Welcome to News, Facts, and Comments, bringing you live updates from Washington, D.C. I am definitely trying to get the live stream going here. For some reason, they're having problems over at the facility where the conference is taking place.
Lovers of Black people.
We're back on.
But then we have the one going after. I just want to introduce these two brothers before I formally introduce our great sisters. When you hear of great historians and master teachers, you think of Ivor Van Sertima, John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben Jokinen. You would be, and I don't mean to be facetious or to put yeast in their shoes, but when you name those great illustrious luminaries, you have to put these two men in that line. They're their students. We have some of the greatest minds in our presence today, and they're going to be here on the panel today. I speak none other than Dr. Tony Browder and Professor James Smalls. Give them a round of applause. Those beautiful examples of what it truly means to put your life on the line. But as I give way, I want to introduce the panel that is about to speak now. First, starting off with Afia Inwa Gaza, Esquire, Executive Director of the... You supposed to be first? Oh, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I got excited. Nkechi Taifa, Esquire, the reparations expert, Reparations Education Project. Please give her a round of applause. I'm just gonna name everybody and then our queen. Say that again. Our queen, Harriet Abubakar Esquire, the lead counsel of the Afro-Descended Nation. Please give her a round of applause. And our dear sister, Ifia Inwa-Gaza Esquire, and Executive Director of the Malcolm X Center. Please give her a round of applause. Now, to take you further in this program, and our moderator for this evening, I want to bring up my brother, my friend, a teacher to me, the Governor General of the Afro-Descended Nation, Ajani Mukaram.
Seems like we're having streaming issues, family. Got a little bit of a delay. Here we go. We're coming back up in about 3 seconds. Thank you all for tuning in. You're watching the National Reparations Convention. This is actually day one. I think
I'm not going to tear it. Just a brief introduction.
With their
and then I'm going to introduce them.
Streams.
Do you remember Morgan Freeman? One of my favorite actors. I'm a Morgan Freeman baby from the Electric Company days. I don't know if y'all remember Electric Company, but Morgan Freeman taught me how to do phonics. He used to say cheese. You remember that? He was the first rapper. Taught me phonics. He said T-R, trade, trade. So I'm gonna stop right there on the TR. I'm gonna use TR tonight before we get these beautiful sisters up here to speak. The first TR. Let's talk about trajectory. Trajectory. The reparations movement is on a positive trajectory. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? We are moving positively. We are on our way. We're galvanizing different groups and coming together. Traction. That's the second TR. We're gaining traction. Our wheels used to spin. We couldn't get any grip on the road. We were going these different directions. We put it in four-wheel drive, baby. We got some traction. And we are moving together, all under these different organizations and different names. But collectively, we're starting to identify and come together under the cause of reparations. When they pull you over, say, that's a Hebrew Israelite driving. Do they? They say, oh, that's one of the new Black Panther parties driving. They don't say it. That's not how they identify. They look at the dark skin and say there's a black man or a black woman, and you know it's hard to be driving while you black in America. They don't care whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hebrew Israelite, Pan-African. They care about the color of your skin. So because we got traction, we put those differences aside. And the last TR for you, TR, tradition. We're establishing a new tradition here in these Americas, where we are no longer fighting each other because of our black skin. We're uniting with each other because of our black skin. So under trajectory, reparations movement is moving. Under traction, not only are we moving toward reparations, but we understand the power of self-determination. And under self-determination, we're establishing a tradition. And that tradition is, let's self-identify as Afro-descendant. We were niggers, coloreds, Negroes, Blacks, African Americans. What's one more name? Afro-descendant, something we decide, and something that has a governing body, the United Nations, that says it identifies 250 million of us. That's the power of the word Afro-descendant. So I appreciate you for getting traction, trajectory, and tradition. Tradition, my Afro-descendant brothers and sisters. You can still be Black Power, you can still be Muslim, but Muslims under the Afro-descendant nation. Hebrew Israelite under the Afro-descendant nation. Pan-Africanism under what? Afro-descendant nation. That's the new tradition. So let me do some introductions here. I think I have these short bios on my handy dandy phone here. We're gonna start out, give me just one moment. We're gonna start out with attorney Nkechi Taifa. She's president of Taifa Group LLC. She's founder and director of the Reparations Education Project Incorporated. She's convener emeritus of the Justice Roundtable and serves as senior fellow for the Columbia University Center for Justice. Taifa was advocacy director for criminal justice at the Open Society Foundations for 16 years. She's got a lot of accolades, so let me end on this one. She is the Legal Defense Fund and director of Howard University School of Law Equal Justice Program. Please give a warm round of applause for attorney Nkechi Taifa.
Thank you so very much, Brother Johnny. And I just want to give all honor and praise to the Honorable Muhammad for your long-standing, long-distance runner on this issue of reparations from way back in the day. So thank you. And thank you for the Afro-descendant nation for inviting me to make this special presentation. So, the human cargo was loaded on ships at a bustling wharf in the nation's capital, destined for plantations in the deep South. Some of the enslaved people pleaded for rosaries as they were rounded up, praying for deliverance. But on this day, in the fall of 1838, no one was spared. Not the 2-month-old baby and her mama, not the field hands, not the shoemaker, and not Cornelius Hawkins, who was about 13 years old when he was forced on board. The enslaved were grandmothers and grandfathers, carpenters and blacksmiths, pregnant women and anxious fathers, children and infants who were fearful, bewildered, and despairing as they saw their families and communities ripped apart by the sale of 1838. Some children were sold without their parents, and the enslaved were dragged off by force to the ships. Others ran away before they could be captured. Their panic and desperation will be mostly forgotten for more than a century, but this was no ordinary sale of enslaved people. The enslaved human beings had belonged to the nation's most prominent Jesuit priest, and they were sold along with scores of others to help secure the future of the premier Catholic institution of higher learning at the time, today known as Georgetown University. So what happened to these 272 men, women, and children who were literally sold down the river? And what, my brothers and sisters, if anything, is owed to the descendants of those enslaved and the descendants of the millions of others whose names and circumstances we will never know, who were sold or insured or raped or castrated or lynched or subjected to gynecological experiments with no anesthesia, convict leasing, forced sterilization, syphilis, red line, police murders, mass incarceration, and more. What is owed, if anything, to the descendants of the enslaved whose kidnappings and torture and uncompensated labor helped to ensure the survival of colleges and universities, banks and corporations and industries and religious institutions and private estates and, yes, local, state, and the federal government. Thank you for allowing me to share as part of my opening framing an excerpt from Professor Rachel Swan's article published in the New York Times on April 16, 2016, chillingly describing the sale of 272 enslaved persons that ensured the future of Georgetown University. But unlike Georgetown University and Jesuit Revelations, where there was a ship's manifest with names, there is rarely evidence of identifiable descendants from the enslavement era from which to highlight not only the atrocities of the era, but its continuing vestiges and seek acknowledgement and remedy. Why is that evidence not manifest? Okay. Over the past decades, when I'm usually asked to talk about the issue of reparations, I'm asked to address the history of the movement and my involvement. Why? Likely because during the 1970s, I sat at the feet of and personally learned from many who we now herald as U.S. reparations legends and now ancestors, Queen Mother Audley Moore, Brother President Imari Abubakari Obadeli, Attorney Chokwe Lumumba, Queen Mother Dorothy Lewis, Brother Hannibal African Moore. They taught me stories of Marcus Garvey, Callie House, Isaiah Dickerson, Belinda Sutton, Tunis Campbell, Pat Singleton, Kimmy McCabe, about General Sherman's 40 acres and a mule, and his inspiration from Southern Black preachers. What I learned did not come out of books. because by and large, this information was, and much still is, whitewashed from popular history. In those early days, during the dawning of the modern era of the reparations movement, Mary Frances Berry had yet to pen "My Face is Black is True" about Callie House and her role in spearheading the National Ex-Slave Mutual Belief Bounty and Pension Association, which had several 100,000 dues-paying members seeking to obtain compensation in the form of pensions for the enslavement from federal agencies. Brother Ray Wimbush had not yet written Belinda's petition. Then, first record of a formal petition for reparations that was pursued and won in Massachusetts. Caleb McDaniel had not researched the case of Henrietta Wood, who successfully sued her former enslaver's estate, receiving, although a pittance, the largest yet settlement against an estate. There was no widespread information about the 1921 massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which left over 300 African Americans, Afro-descendants, it's good with me, new Africans, it's all good, dead, and thousands homeless after mobs of white people attacked the Greenwood community known as Black Wall Street. There was scant research in the public domain on Ida B. Wells Barnett, who uplifted the hard issue of lynchings. The role of the Catholic Church in serving and saving Georgetown University from bankruptcy through the sale of 272 human beings had not yet been exposed. And the only people giving Queen Mother more legitimacy during those days were the radicals. I know the 13th Amendment, passed in 1865, was supposed to represent progress, as the bill recognized the freedom of all enslaved Africans and made it illegal to continue slavery except for that ridiculous except as punishment for a crime clause. However, there was still pain. There was no payment for stolen labor, land, rape, economic exploitation. In fact, the Dred Scott case had been decided scarcely 8 years prior, 1857, where the United States Supreme Court ruled that a Black person in America had what? No rights, which a white person was bound to respect. And neither Dred Scott nor any other Black person could be a citizen of the United States in the manner in which that word was used in the Constitution. And the 14th Amendment, it imposed the obligations of U.S. citizenship upon the African in America without the benefits of that citizenship and without any meaningful discussion of political alternatives inherent in the international right to self-determination. The audacity. How are you going to take a free people and tell them that they've got to become part of your family, especially since you had castrated his father, raped his mother, sold your children off to your relatives, didn't ask if she wanted to join your family, be a U.S. citizen, didn't ask if he wanted to start his own family. If the African was free, pursuant to the 13th Amendment, no one, not even the ex-enslaver, could define the African's future status for him and impose the status upon him. This was the right of the newly freed people, the Africans alone. It was a fruit of the international right to self-determination. It is one of the pillars of reparations, which is still due to us today. And Brown versus Board of Education, thank you for reminding us that today was that day, May 17, 1954, progress. My analysis as to why that Supreme Court case was even saw the light of day in 1954 was because of the historic 1951 petition to the United Nations filed by the Civil Rights Congress and led by William Patterson, W.B. Du Bois, Mary Church Terrell, and 90-something others, charging the United States with what? With genocide. Rather than be subject to scrutiny by the world community, the decision was made to desegregate the schools with the now infamous, quote unquote, all deliberate speed clause. And the final areas are supposed to denote progress worthy of applause for the Civil Rights Acts of 1957 and 64, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Well, the 1967 Civil Rights Act 57-1 featured the longest filibuster in history by Senator Strom Thurmond. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was introduced only after Birmingham, Alabama, police unleashed dogs and fire hoses on Black men, women, and children peacefully protesting. And the Voting Rights Act of 65, key provisions have been eviscerated. And just this year alone, 49 states have introduced over 400 bills to restrict voting rights. So yes, there are lingering adverse effects and impacts from the enslavement era, which persist throughout the United States today. But no, more progress is not what is needed. What is needed is reparations, reparatory justice, reparations that addresses the multifaceted harms that have been inflicted, that call for multifaceted remedies, reparations to remedy the present effects of past discrimination, reparations not to reconcile the contradictions created by the nation's founding fathers, but reparations to expose the contradictions and move forward towards amends. But we cannot know. Oh,
Hold it.
I'm talking too loud.
That's right.
Can we put it up here? Yeah, let's do that. Because I am a loud, probably don't even need the microphone. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, thank you. But the problem is we don't know our history. Much of it has been buried or glossed over, misinterpreted, or just plain old obliterated. And what do we need to do? As I always say, we gotta open up that casket. Our history must not be buried. It must not be swept under the rug. And for our white allies, we, the descendant victims, must not be the only ones to uncover and open up that casket and unpack it. In fact, I have a colleague, Katrina Brown, white, who uncovered evidence that her ancestors were the largest slave trading family in U.S. history. She documented her roots, that they brought over 10,000 Africans to the Americas in chains in a film that she produced, Traces of the Trade, a story from the deep north, not the deep south. She was in Massachusetts. This is what she said. Everyone in the town. See, people were trying to say this was just the South thing. She said everybody in the town lived off of slavery. The boat maker, the iron worker who made the shackles, the coopers who made the barrels to hold the rum, the distillers who took the molasses and sugar and made it into the rum. Literally, she said the whole town in the North was dependent upon the slave trade. Wealth and privilege in the United States, she said, has been amassed in large measure as a direct or indirect consequence of the institution of enslavement. Yes, the demand for reparatory justice in the United States has been long and continuous. And quiet as it's kept, reparations were in fact paid as slavery ended. They just weren't paid to Black folk. Okay, reparations were paid to the former white slave owners to compensate them for the loss of their so-called property, us. We need to open up that casket. Indeed, do you remember what then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said after the historic reparations hearing in the House of Representatives in 2019? He said, quote, "I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago, for whom none of us are currently living, are responsible. I don't think that's a good idea." McConnell, who is a direct descendant of great-grandfathers on both of his family lines who owned slaves, the nerve, the absolute gall. I'm sorry, I'm just saying, there's a lot about Haiti in the news today, but we're not taught that reparations were paid by them after they successfully fought the British, French, and Spanish. Not to us when they abolished slavery in 1833, but to the former white slave owners. And right here in DC, April 16, 1862, Abraham Lincoln signed the Compensated Emancipation Act, not to compensate us, no, but to compensate the former white slave owners. So as I'm coming down, let's see, why the federal government, people have asked. What's in the injury done all by the states? Well, I just want us to take a quick look at the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Clause 1, Section 9, expressly guaranteed and sanctioned the continued importation of kidnapped African prisoners of war. That's what we were, to every state that might desire us until the year 1808. That article also upheld the further dehumanization of the African by relegating our status to that of 3/5 of a white man. And most egregious, the African on this soil was subjected to the authority of yet another constitutional provision, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3, also known as a fugitive slave provision, which mandated that no enslaved person, even if he or she had reached a free state, none of us was saved. And it was the duty, the legal obligation, the constitutional responsibility of every white man, woman, or child to track down the escaped African, deliver him and her up to the government. You see, this is why redress from the federal government is so very important. In addition to all of the other culpable entities, every time we ran away, it didn't matter if we just slipped away quietly in the night, Harriet Tubman. It didn't matter if we organized elaborate insurrections, Demarbisi. It didn't matter if we fled to Pennsylvania or New York. They were going to come after us with their armed forces and their patty bowlers and their We spoke on reparations before the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, which I issued a resolution in support of H.R. 40, the federal reparations bill. And I told them that there was one thing I learned from the Jewish experience. I said, no, it wasn't the more than $70 billion in reparations the German government paid to more than 800,000 Holocaust survivors, or the $7 billion Germany agreed to give to the state, the illegal settler colonial state of Israel. Now, it was the concept of transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. It was a study that was done of third-generation Holocaust survivors, where researchers found that they had inherited genes that had been transformed as a result of their ancestors' trauma and were becoming more susceptible to anxiety and other disorders. It was found that the trauma from the Holocaust traveled in their genes, transmitted intergenerationally, and I began to think. Black folk have inherited centuries of trauma as a result of not only the enslavement era, but also everything else. If the Jewish Holocaust caused immense emotional, physical, and psychological effects intense enough to cause trauma to survivors, then what is the impact on living Black people today due to the horrors and brutality, trauma, and terrorism of the enslavement itself, the kidnapping, the forced free labor, the stealing of our languages and culture, the rapes, the breedings, the dismemberment, the brutality and inhumanity of the Black codes, the convict lease labor, the peonage system, the chain gangs, the sharecropping, the lynchings, the harms of Jim Crow, apartheid, denial of the benefits of the Homestead Act and the GI Bill, the gerrymandering, the redlining, the educational inequities, the health disparities, the mass incarceration, and more. Yes. For 400 years, or however one wishes to measure the time, all of this still exists within the collective genes of Black people in this country. Why shouldn't the great-great-grandchildren of those who were stripped of humanity, language, and culture, and all of those other things that I said, who were stripped of land and massacred wholesale in Black enclaves such as Rosewood and Tulsa and Elaine and Wilmington and more, and the second, why should we not be compensated? I'm going to just get this because I am trying to be courtesy of time. Let me just say, I'm just going to say that caskets are opening up across the country, uncovering more and more evidence of historic racial atrocities, lynchings, massacres, with entire Black communities burned to the ground and decimated. Mere scraps were given to the descendants of the 1923 Rosewood slaughter, and there still has been no settlement on behalf of the 1921 Tulsa bloodbath and destruction of his Black Wall Street. Not one of the recommendations from the 2000 commission investigating the 1898 racial insurrection and coup d'etat in Wilmington, North Carolina was passed. We need to Google up some of this stuff, y'all, by the legislator. Remnants from the slave ship Clotilda, which in 1860 illegally transported Africans to Mobile Bay, Alabama, more than 50 years after the slave trade was abolished. The descendants today are still seeking amends. Countless companies and industries benefited and were enriched from the profits made as a result of the trafficking in human beings. There are companies that sold life insurance. My heart is full. There is unquestionably a racial reckoning happening in this country. The winds of change are shifting, y'all, in favor of reparations. The casket is being thrust wide open. There are increasing examples of historic harms being uncovered with initiatives to right wrongs as we speak. A month does not go by without me hearing of new manifestations of vestige.
Wow. Powerful. Isn't it? It's always good to be in the midst of our scholars because you give them a certain amount of time and they come in under the time. Class, just classy. We appreciate Attorney Nietzsche. You were really dynamic. Proven that there is a right. She quoted that the old senator said, well, that happened 150 years ago, and I wasn't involved in that. Well, yes, you were. You reaped the benefits of it. And guess what? I wasn't there 150 years ago, but I can't speak my original language. I don't practice my original culture. I don't profess and worship my original God. So you destroyed me as a human. And for that, you got to pay. So what you did to us caused generational problems. So I think Attorney Nietzsche made a good cause, a good strategy that because of those things, we deserve reparations. I'm going to move right on to our next panelist. I just remember when my eyesight was so good I could read. I need help nowadays. Bear with me. I'm going to introduce the next speaker, another powerful attorney, a sister, and a mama, Mama Ethelia Nengwanza Esquire, is a South Carolina-based civil and human rights attorney and historian. She is the founding director of the Malcolm X Center for Self-Determination and the WMXP LP Community Radio. She is a veteran of the 1960s Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She's a member of NCOBRA, commonly known as NCOBRA, the National Coalition for the Blacks for Reparations, and she's also Black Coalition for Peace and Reparation, BIBC. At the UN, she served as the chair of the U.S. Human Rights Network and Political Prisoners and State Repression. Well-rounded. Ms. Wangaza is the founding member of the Black Alliance for Peace, BAP. She is a member of the Imam Jamal Al-Amin Network and the Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, successful special committee to elect Julian Bond turned historical Atlanta. And she wrote a powerful paper, a Black Power position paper project, and she is a proud daughter of Garveyites. Would you please put your hands together and help me welcome our sister, Mama Afia Wangaza.
Greetings, sisters and brothers. Many thanks to the Afro-descendant nation for this opportunity and this honor to join you this evening. To recall the spark that lit the flame that is today's reparations. To 40% of us were brought in chains into North America. To prepare for the work that NCOBRA had set out for itself specifically and for all of us generally, we began by internalizing, or more accurately, triggering co-activist attorney Alida Small and myself designed and conducted an inspiring and instructive history tour which traced our people's steps from Sullivan Island's barracoons to the old courthouse where we were put on the auction block, to the concentration camps known as plantations. We visited what I call the original ghettos, the slave quarters, the site of the Stono Rebellion, Denmark, BC, and Gullah Jack. to the site of the hospital workers' strike, where Black workers during the days of Jim Crow said, enough is enough. 20 cents a day is not adequate. An intergenerational passing of the torch, a relay at the historic Burke Industrial High School. Queen Mother Nia Kumba poured libations at each of these sites, marking the moment and triggering in our bodies, which keep the count, the memory of those experiences. The intergenerational passing of the torch was overseen by the internationally recognized track star, Dr. Thaddeus J. Bell. The red, black, and green baton, created by Greenville carpenter and activist James Carter, dramatized the symbolism and the historic significance of the passing of the torch. The relay sealed our bond with the past and affirmed our elders' trust in our generation. The runners included Queen Mother Audley Moore, who was pushed in her wheelchair, Baba's Alajo Adigbala, Imari Obadeli, Chokwe Lumumba, Ahmed Obafemi, Generals Chewy and Rashid, Reparations Ray Jenkins. Please, we must honor, absolutely. When we say their names, they live again. We must always keep them alive by saying their names. James Cameron, a lynch mob survivor, as well as visiting continental African children in the charge of Queen Mother Moore and Dr. Dolores Blakely. Each ran a turn in the race, carrying the baton from one generation to the next. Historian Keithy Baird gave the memorial keynote. The weight of my blue King's cloth, kente cloth, carried the opening Maiafa memorial service and ecumenical unity prayers. The service was held at the now blood-soaked and internationally famed Mother Emanuel AME Church, where 9 of our brothers and sisters were murdered by Dylan Roof, a white supremacist youth who presumed to take up the mantle of his ancestors. We left the church to go to what is called the Battery, the seawall. In the background, we could feel the spirit and the presence of the ancestors. Any of you been to Charleston? Those of you who've been to Charleston, you know that the feeling, the presence of the ancestors is thick. You can see them in your mind's eye We came full circle as we threw handfuls of basket-making sweetgrass. The connection between the grass from which baskets are made in Sierra Leone is precisely the same sweetgrass that the baskets in Charleston are made. We connected them. We threw handfuls of sweetgrass into the Atlantic Ocean, symbolizing our return to our homeland. No, despite all industrialized efforts, we were never deprived of our humanity. And while to this day, we do not know with clarity the degree to which we have retained our Africanity, we know that there's certain things that we do that we can never or have not been able to explain. Like, why do we name our children Monday to the days of the week? Why do we put broken bowls upside down on our graves? Why do we name from one generation to the next, carrying forth words or songs or pieces of us that we've held on to for 400 years? The body keeps the count. On that weekend in Charleston, people wept. They changed their names. They committed to, and to this day, do service in the cause of reparations. Today, we continue to be inspired by and describe the experience with vivid recollection and deep emotion. Along with ourselves, national and local press imagination was captured. Coverage was unprecedented and remains engaged even to this day. On that day, like tonight, we were blessed to have Baba Tony Browder to participate in our processing of the experience and the pangs of consciousness and commitment that emerged from that spark that led to today's reparations fire.
Thank you so much, Mother Athea Wangaza. I really especially enjoy the history and just the insight of going down memory lane of all those who've been on this road for reparations. And she spoke so eloquently about passing the baton, the torch. That is a beautiful thing. Yes, we are picking up the baton. We're continuing to run this race. And part of our booklet says, in terms of reparations, how much, how would we define it? We've got this whole conference to figure that out. But I am and was born and raised in the US. And let me tell you, I know something about bills. Now there's a bill owed to us. They said, but it happened so long ago. Oh, thank you so much. Because when it happened a long time ago, interest starts to accrue, doesn't it? You know, we struggle with managing our checkbook, and you miss the payment to I don't know who's here in DC, but People's Gas or Commonwealth Edison, you're late on that bill. They said you should have paid it by the 15th. What happens to that bill if you pay it by the 30th? You got a late fee. So let's say together to America. America, you got a late fee. Yeah. Passing time doesn't make it go away. It makes it bigger. We still have one other attorney on this panel who I have the pleasure to introduce. Little secret. She's like my mother away from my mother. She's like my family. Attorney Harriet Abubakar. Also, she's known as Queen Mashaki Muhammad. She is the wife of the Honorable Silas Muhammad, and she is the monarch and lead counsel for the Afro-descendant nation. She studied at the American University in Cairo, Egypt, earned her bachelor's degree from the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA, and obtained her Juris Doctorate from the UCLA School of Law. She served formally as president of Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys, president of the Georgia Alliance of African American Attorneys, and was the lead attorney of All for Reparations and Emancipation, AFRE.
Greetings to everyone in our viewing audience and those who are streaming. And I want to thank just everyone that has an interest in this, whether you heard it from a friend, whether you came here out of curiosity, for whatever reason. I'm really happy to see all of you here tonight. And that introduction maybe sound quite old, and I got to thinking about it, and yeah, girl, you're getting up there. I'm 83 this year, and I had just discussed we don't have to teach you our reasons or demands for reparations. We've all lived through it. I feel like I'm just like you are. Some of my experiences as a child are some of your experiences as a child. And I came from a very, I'd say, mixed up family. It's a one that didn't cause mental problems. But just before we get into the United Nations part, I just wanted to share with you, I came from one of those strange families that lived up in Terre Haute, Indiana area. And my, I guess, great grandmother had a lot of children for her. Hold it.
Yes,
ma'am. One of us is too loud. I guess loud, I'm not loud enough. Oh, okay. My great grandmother had a lot of babies for her slave master, and he must have loved her because they had a family unit. And she was wise enough to, as he was toward the end, she said, we have all these children. Don't you think you could at least give them their freedom? Because back in the day and under the law, if you had children, they were assets to the family. They weren't considered as children. So that great white grandfather of mine wasn't really thinking about it, really. It was the mother that was thinking about it. You know how we women are. And she talked him into giving him not only all of their freedom, but the plantation too. And this was way before slavery had ended, you know. So what did great grandmother do? But she went to her black church, and they set up and helped start that Underground Railroad. And at that time, that was punishable by death if you get caught, you know. But she worked that, and she had white Quaker friends. They're called friends now. They were Quakers then. And they didn't like the idea of slavery. So they were willing to help in this Underground Railroad. And they did this for many years and were very successful with it. And when I grew up, every year we would celebrate our success under the Underground Railroad. And that gave us a good feeling about what we had done. Of course, some of my relatives had to give in. They chased after the dollar, so they decided they were going to go white. So they went all the way and were sliding in, told us, we love y'all, but don't come visit. But anyway, in my lifetime, I went through the experiences you did. And it had to do with identity. And during those times of growing up, there were many occasions when I wasn't quite sure where I fit because of that background, because I grew up in a white town in Watsika, Illinois. Some of you might have heard of it. I don't know. And my family were the plasterers for that town. So I grew up in an atmosphere where I was accepted because we helped build the town. And I was not white. That wasn't the issue at all. But it made for everyone else in the town, there was an issue. But what I learned from that experience, I learned that there are different types of white views on the problems that we have here in the United States. And there were a lot of them that just hated the idea of slavery. So they're out there. And in this day and time, with reparations becoming a hot issue again, we've got to find them, and we ain't turning down no money. All right. Let's remember that. Because like my sisters have quoted, a lot of times it was the slave master for some crazy reason that got paid and the slaves didn't get anything. So that wasn't right either. But today, what I want to do is give some tribute to my husband, because he is going to be speaking here tomorrow. And he is going to let you know why he's got this started, why we ended up with this name, Afro-Descendant, and how he threw me out there to give me a try at it. One day, my dear husband, sitting right here, Silas Muhammad, came to me. I had been practicing law about at least 10 years then. And he said, Harriet, you know what we need to do on this reparations issue is approach the United Nations. And I said, the United Nations? I didn't study anything like that in law school. Wasn't on my mind. But you need to go, Harriet. You need to go find out what their procedures are, how they operate, how they do things. And that's going to be what we need to have in the future as our weapons for reparations. And said, well, I'll give it a try. So I decided to take a month off of my practice, lost all that money. And no problem. I said, they don't have that in the United States, you know. So I went into an area I had picked out. I'm learning for my people, y'all, what to do in Europe, you know. Found out I had registered in a red light district. So that became a problem later. When I found that out, I checked out and got a more decent neighborhood to live in. But I started out there by going to a big Catholic church that had a seminar going on what do you do in the UN? How do you function in the UN? So that was right up my alley, and it's something I had planned for. And that's the first thing I did. And they gave us this program on how to meet with people, discuss your problem with them. They put me under the wings of a male attorney, to teach me the ropes on how do you get along in the UN. So on the first day we went there, excuse me, he decided he was going to introduce me to a lot of key white men who were like heads of their nations, or they were representatives of their nation. And it started off quite well, except I'm wondering now, what is he up to? Why is he introducing me in French? You know, why can't he do it in English? Something we would all understand. Well, I just went along with the program. The French went on, the expressions changed, they got flushed, their eyes started bucking, and that's the thing they had in common every time. So I'm sure that he was over there telling them that I was getting ready to stir up that reparations thing, something that most of Europe had been kind of fearing, you know, they didn't want to hear it. And they all had the same expression. So I said, yeah, okay, I know what you're doing. But still, I had been put under his auspices, so I listened and I took some advice from him. He told me, Harriet, if for your cause you want to be heard and taken seriously in the UN, what you have to do is be there for 7 years straight. And if you don't give it 7 years and be there every time, they met about 3 times a year, no one's going to take you seriously. No one's going to pay you any attention. I said, well, we are very serious about what we're doing. So when we would have these get-togethers and parties at night. And they weren't really parties. They were ways to get to know each other and put forth your cause while you were there. And this was back in 1992. I did not flinch from day one in letting them know what we were pushing for. And I told them, I'm here to make the United Nations conscious and aware of our needs in the United States to be paid reparations. We're going to get our reparations. 1992, told me. And one woman came to me smiling. She said, oh, wait till the State Department hears about that. I said, well, all right, whatever. Tell them whatever you want to. But that's what we're here for. So we started learning as much as we could. They had a session they put together called UMPO, close to the United Nations. It meant Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. This particular setup was held in the Netherlands, and we had to fly in there for that. My husband went with me on that, for that training. And we took another attorney from Los Angeles area, Theodore Egan's, and we went there for a whole week on that training. That organization was kind of unusual for the United Nations because the United Nations doesn't really like to get into the changing or interfering of other countries and what they do. They're not there to try to cause revolution or anything. So what they wanted to do was tell us, if you have the drive, and if you can learn the know-how, and it can happen. You want your country? Most everybody there wanted the country. They even had people from former Soviet Union, whose name was Georgia. And I think out of that bunch of us that was the only country that actually went all the way and got recognized as a functioning nation. But we were there and we learned quite a bit. We learned it was not so much about the territory, because they had a city-state they used as an example. Some of you are hearing this for the second time, but I want all of you to hear it so that you know our quest for reparations is very doable, and it has been done by other nations. You just have to know how to get it off the ground, how to get it started, but it's doable, and we're going to do it. You gotta want to do it. We learned what we could at that session. Toward the end of that session, they appointed about 5 of us to put together a week-long summary of everything. And to our surprise, there was sabotage going on in this session. There were a group of whites that broke off from us. We were supposed to do it as a group. Sum up what had happened during the week. They had put together what they wanted presented, and they were ready to move on us. So when we heard that, we said, it's not happening. So we met, the rest of us, and we put together our report. When we got back there just in time. We went up to the mic, took it over, and gave the report that we should have jointly given. But we learned something from that. And that's something I want to share with you. For those young people who are going to go on and go into these international arenas, watch your back. Watch your back. There's going to be somebody trying to stab you in your back. You would think not at that level would that happen, but it happens. All right. So these are the things that my husband, Silas Muhammad, wants to share with you, because most of us in the States, we are in our own organizations. We have been moving on this United States government to give us our reparations, do right by us, and to history hasn't happened. And you don't have to figure out why it hasn't happened. Well, you know, if somebody hits you in a car and they're the defendants, and they also run the courthouse, they're not going to be too inclined to rule in your favor, you know, and they'll wiggle and figure out a way as to why your case has no merit. It has no standing, as we call it, and it cannot be brought, or it should be dismissed. And most of the time, it is dismissed. So what Silas Muhammad wanted to do was get over there, learn the ways, and learn what is at heart to make the United Nations get some backbone. And that's exactly what he did. I'm not going to tell what he's going to talk about, but it's real meaty. You'll have to come back tomorrow to hear the details of it. All right. He's going to give you the more precise details as to what got their attention. And it did. It got their attention. Some of them were kind of in shock. They were embarrassed. They looked at him, one man representative, one Egyptian representative stood up, kind of surprised. He said, "It takes a little boy to tell us that the king doesn't have on any clothes." And you all have heard that story. Yeah. And he was surprised at it. Others were surprised when he hit them with it. He said, there was a professor from Norway, very good, knowledgeable professor. And he pointed out to them what the problem was. And he said, "Mr. Muhammad, you're absolutely right. We did make a mistake. We did leave you out of international law protection. Now we have to figure out, how do you fit?" And they spent several years working with us and to try to right some of the wrongs they had caused us. And it's some of these things you'll find out tomorrow also. Huh? 17 years we spent going back and forth. We took them serious. You say 7 years, we'll give it 17. And they started us off at the Woodrow Wilson Palace right there in Geneva. And my husband had to point out to him, we can't discuss these things intelligently because we've been slaves and we speak the slave master's language. So will you, United Nations, provide us with, that went fast, provide us with interpreters. And so that costs money, you know, and United Nations on a skimpy budget. But do you know they gave us several seminars, and they selected the person to run this thing. They got delegations from these different countries. We're talking about 29 countries that have the slavery diaspora to deal with. And out of those 29 countries, the United Nations paid for and had representatives there from 19 countries. When we met, by the time we got to La Ceiba, Honduras, we were on the identity issue, which is a problem we all have. Not just here in the States, we have identity problems all up and down the South Americas, over in the Caribbean island, and even our people that we had smuggled into Canada. people up there. So we were dealing with those kinds of things. So the United States, the United Nations picked that for a reason. He's going to deal tomorrow with more of what was discussed. This was in La Ceiba, Honduras. And we'll go into what was discussed and the name and how we ended up with the name Afro-Descendants. And this is a name that we picked for ourselves. How about that? We took a vote and we selected our own name, Afro-Descendants. Now we want to put together the force of the 250 million people that we represent and have a force to go into in the future. Because we've done all this. It took us 17 years to get to this point with 19 other nations. So you're not alone in this. We've done our struggling here in the United States. We're going to go forward from here with other compatriots in those other countries. And we're going to make this reparations work for all of us. Thank you.
So let's give our first group of panelists, the attorneys, our sister attorneys, a big round of applause. We're going to do a little transitioning here as they lead the stage. We have the brothers following. Remember the saying, the corrected saying, in front of every good man is good women, not behind, in front of. Another round of applause as they exit the stage. There are two others. Our conductor, Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, Black Lawyers for Justice, and the ADN conductor of this reparations movement is not here tonight. He was going to be a part of the program, but he did ask that we have two additional brothers speak prior to bringing on Dr. Tony Browder and Professor James Small. So at this time, we're only going to have one of the brothers speak during this intermission, and then we'll have the other brothers speak when they're done, and then we'll wrap this program up. So my brother put me through phonics. You're going to go second. You're second. His name is Orapitus Maximus. I said, okay, you make me do that Morgan Freeman stuff with your name. But who's going to speak next is a brother, Senor Baye. He's first assistant president of General UNIA-ACL. So we'll give him 5 minutes, and then we'll do the, how many? 3 minutes. We'll give him 3 minutes. I got a boss too, brother. We'll give him 3 minutes. Then we'll make the transition, and we'll call up Prince Yosef to introduce our brother speakers. Thank you for your time. And brother, you have stage.
Honorable Salis Muhammad, to everyone present, particularly to this particular center, the Shaw Community Center, which used to be Lincoln Temple Church. It's not about me, he or she, y'all. It's about we collectivity. If we really want to win our reparations, we got to connect our Blacktricity. Africans at home and abroad are rising up. You don't have to check Urugu's news, but check out your own self. The Right Excellent Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey was absolutely clear. And I'm here to tell you When we say UNIA, African Communities League, Rehabilitating Committee 2020, that's what we're doing. Our third assistant president general lives in Sierra Leone, has been there for 15 years. Our second assistant president general, we understand African women rule. That's my dear sister, Dr. Chinzara Kahini, out of the Virgin Islands. The president general is in Philadelphia, and I'm here in DC. This is my home ground. But what I want you all to know, that it's no reason for us not to understand that we have to deal with our internal repair, and that means we have to get the slavery out of our minds. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience on earth, but our spirit lives on forever, particularly those ancestors who paved the way for us. Not just Marcus Garvey, Amy Jocks Garvey, and African sisters, which all of us come through the African womb. We understand African women rule. If you look around the world, you'll see African women are coming into power all over the place. We say we got plenty of African nation states. We don't say country. We don't say countries in the big continent. All over the world, though, we are nation states. So regardless of whether or not we have formally put that together, as the Right Excellent Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey had a vision and was extremely clear, Africans must come together. We can work better together. Despite our minor differences, we have far more in common. So let's don't fight over the minor differences. Let's come together and get the power that's required. We've never been a minority. We always been a majority. But unless we come back to the African mind, your behind won't follow. So we fully support. We are here to let you know that wherever we are continuing the Garvey movement, and we're not just talking about within the UNIA, because people that don't know, every African is a member of what Garvey established. So you got to recognize and organize and close ranks. All the movements and organizations are responsible to come together, and yes, we can get whatever. Man and woman can do what man and woman have done. The Most High made no mistakes. Humanity and man and woman made them all. And if we made the mistakes, we got everything we need to correct ourselves. And that means we can straighten out all of those mistakes and bring the solutions. So don't just get on a plane to go to Africa, bring Africa back in your mind. The whole world is the house until Africa is free. And it may still be after Africa is free, all the world our dominion. So don't be content with the food of chickens. Rise up your wings and fly, y'all. Let's go back and collect and learn who we are. Study, organize, but stop fighting each other. Urugu divided us at the Berlin Conference so we would not be united and organized. Kwame Nkrumah told us, Sekou Touré, Patrice Lumumba. Yeah, I'm wrapped right here, sir. Let me be clear. We have already won the war spiritually, but we have war physically. And until we understand that we have to use what we have to take back the power, don't ask them to give it to us. We're going to take reparations. One God, one aim, one destiny, one Africa.
All right, my brother. Powerful. Let's do the transition to the second half of our National Scholars panels, and I'll turn it over to Prince Joseph.
Again, let's give another round of applause for all of those great speakers who mounted this rostrum. Time is of the essence, so I won't be long. But as a son of my mother, a Muslim follower of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as a son of my father, Hebrew Israelite, Prince ICL, those two, irrespective to their religious persuasions, their personal journey to God and back to their Creator, they instilled in me what I am bearing witness to today, a people concretizing their identity to return back to the origin of the source of their creator, which gives us an ultimate power of unity, which gives us the ultimate power that allows us to transcend whatever labels and whatever titles we have to take on to reach our destiny, but to ascend to a greater understanding. That's what we're witnessing right now. And as I bring up that one who will bring these great minds that are in our midst today, as I said earlier, you have to put these two in the line of those great men who were the trailblazers to understanding not just our Africanity, but understanding our history, not just so we can recite it, but we can make it applicable to our daily lives. I am so honored as I bring up Brother Uhuru. Please come up as he
First, giving honor to God at Union Temple, United Temple, because we're all in the union anyway, right? Has anybody ever heard of this young lady by the name of Alberta Williams King? Raise your hand if you heard of her before. See, I got half. See, this is not good. Got 20% of the people that don't know our queen. This queen was the wife of Martin Luther King's father. And y'all know what happened. So not only do we need reparations, but we need to give this queen here a big hand, who gave a beautiful speech, the Honorable Silas Muhammad's wife. Stand on your feet, black man. Stand on your feet, black woman. With the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful, the one God, whom all praise is due, the Lord of the world. I beseech you, my brothers and sisters, with the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. In the English language, we just simply say, peace be unto you. I bring you greetings from the King Emmanuel Baptist Church, where Pastor Darrell F. Bell is my pastor. And guess what I have? This is a petition by the Honorable Silas Muhammad in 1974. Hopefully I can get an autographed copy. This is the first edition. This is given to me by Chief Minister Najib Muhammad and Brother Captain Abdul Ali. So thank you, sir. Hopefully I can get signed. I worked with Brother Hadari Abdul Ali at Pyramid Bookstore, and it was one of the top selling books. Speaking of books, I'm getting ready to bring on Brother Tony Browder. Y'all heard of Brother Tony Browder? He really needs no introduction. He's been putting in the work. He's been writing the books. His daughter's been writing the books. He's been traveling to Africa back and forth, doing the tour guides in Washington, D.C. And I also give you greetings from a brother by the name of Malik Zulu Shabazz. He is a great man. And he is, as Brother the Honorable Silas Muhammad would say, the conductor, Brother Malik. And he worked very hard this morning. We worked and we did a rally at the City One Bank, Capital One Bank, 1947 14th Street. And we're going to be there again tomorrow morning. So if y'all want to come join us, please come join us. And this is not a game. We want economic sanctions. We want economic sanctions. So your homework, brothers and sisters, is to please listen to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's speech on April the 3rd, 1968. And he talked about the economic sanctions, telling people to take your money out their bank and put it in a bank that serves our best interests. I made a digress, but I am going to let you know about this great brother by the name of Tony Browder. Brother Malik Shabbat sends his greetings. He is the founder and director of IKG Cultural Resources and has devoted 36 years researching ancient Egyptian history, science, philosophy, and culture. Without further ado, I present to some and present to others, Tony Browder. Let us receive him.
All right. My brother gave the introduction just like I like them, short and sweet. So I am so happy to be here, so proud to be in the presence of people that I love, people that I respect, colleagues who have been doing the work for decades. I am not a person who speaks about reparations. I leave that to folk who have more expertise than I do. What I wanted to talk about specifically this evening is mental or spiritual reparations. These are things that we have within us, things that we control ourselves, things that we don't have to ask anybody for. It's simply a matter of turning to ourselves and doing the things that we have always had the capacity to do. So I was asked by my brother Malik to do a PowerPoint because folk who know me know that I always use visuals. An artist by training, I came into history kind of in the game, but I'm an artist by training, and I understand that visuals have a way of speaking to your subconscious mind and delivering more content than simply words can. So we're going to be doing a PowerPoint. Things are set up a little differently. The sister in the back is going to be controlling the images for me. I don't have the truth is in the books. It was legal for us to write or to read because the truth is in books. So what I'm going to share are a series of images that speak to the power of knowledge that has always been here, hidden in plain sight. So those of you all who know me, know of my Egypt on the Potomac field trip, know that this is a field trip that we've been doing for 36 years. Taking you around the city to show you that the essence of African history and culture and spirituality has been literally hidden in plain sight. And I've come to understand after studying subject matter is that it's not simply a matter of white folk put these things here. Our ancestors put these things here, put these objects here, so that when we return to our right minds, we would have everything we need to do everything that needs to be done here in this country. We built America. We made this nation. We are the heart and soul of this country. We know it. When we act on it, we will have everything at our disposal to turn the world right side up. Next slide, please. So, cultural reparations, next slide. I'm so glad to see my brother James here. he and I go way back to 1987, 1988. He's been a wonderful role model for me. He's been a wonderful teacher. He's been a phenomenal brother. And about 15 years ago, Brother James called me up one day and said, Tony, there's this building in Lower Manhattan that has some statues in front of it. And I know they mean something. I can't interpret them, but I know with your skills, you can. So he brought me to New York and had me examine this building. It's the U.S. Customs House. It's in Lower Manhattan. It was built in 1907. There are 4 statues in front of this building, and they represent the 4 continents: Asia, America, Europe, and Africa. The only 3 continents are important to my discussion this evening. And I know the images may be kind of small, but I want you all to see what I'm going to share with you, because it shows you the extent to which others have taken our knowledge, taken our truths, and empowered themselves with it by pushing us to the back of the bus. Next slide, please. One more time, twice. Next time. Next slide. So of the 3 statues we're going to look at is America is first. So we see this statue of a woman. And all of these continents, all of the 7 continents are named after women, because symbolically and metaphorically, women are responsible for bringing life into the world, the lives who create culture, who create history. So women are appropriate symbols for life, for power, for consciousness. So you see America holding symbols that represent this country. One of the things that you see her holding in her left hand is a torch, which symbolizes light or knowledge. Next to America is Europe. And the woman, the female figure that represents Europe, is Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom, knowledge, and power, right? And warfare. And what I want you to know, hit it one more time, sis. What I want you to note, that red arrow shows you Minerva rests her hand on a book. And a book symbolizes knowledge. That book is open. An open book represents the application of knowledge. That open book rests on a globe, which represents Europeans' desire to use knowledge to conquer the world. So they're telling you very clearly who their ancestors are and what they have done. And America has been the beneficiary of what their European ancestors. And sleep is a metaphor for death, for being unconscious. And what it represents is the fact that Africa is dead. Africa is unconscious. She's unable to defend herself, defend her people, defend her resources. Now, as devastating as that image is, what's important about these 3 statues is what is behind each of those 3 statues. Hit it, sis. Behind the statue of Mother Africa, you see a thief. And this thief is cloaked. And he's holding, or she's holding, a vessel in her hands. And what I submit to you, sisters and brothers, she is holding the knowledge of Africa. And as a result of the theft of the knowledge of Africa, Africa is unconscious. Africa is dead. Hit it one more time, sis. So now you see the thief is behind Minerva in Europe. And what is that thief doing? That thief is pulling the covers off of her head. She is immersing herself in the knowledge that she's stolen from Africa, and she is reading a book. She is studying from the knowledge that she stole out of Africa. Next slide. We see, next slide, one more time. We see the thief now is in America, and the covers are being pulled off, and they're now free to move throughout North America, South America, and every island in the Caribbean. In 1907, Europeans were very brazen about telling the world who they are and what they've done. But the important takeaway is they got their knowledge out of Africa. And as a result of the theft of African knowledge, African brilliance, Africans are dead, mentally dead, unconscious. Next slide. This is an image above the entrance to the Library of Congress, the greatest repository of history, culture, and knowledge in the world. And what you see in this image, in the center figure, is a female who is uncovered. She has uncovered the knowledge of Africa. And hit it slide, hit it sis. She's holding a pen in her hand, writing, recording history. Hit it one more time. And she's looking down to her left to a brother who is dressed in pharaonic clothing. So she is looking to Africa as the source of her knowledge. This is Library of Congress. People hide the truth in plain sight because most people don't know what they're looking at. They don't pay attention as they go to work or as they go into a restaurant and going out. But the best way to hide a secret is to put it in the open where everybody can see it. So I'm sharing with you these secrets that have been hidden in plain sight so that you can understand how others have used African knowledge to empower themselves. It's all here. And all we need to do is to take it back and use it, and we will change the world. Next slide. This is an image I found last month when I was in San Antonio, Texas. It is above the entrance to the San Antonio Express newspaper building. And what we see is on the right-hand side, we see a man and a woman in Africa. Now, they're depicted as Europeans, but we all know the first human beings on the planet came out of Africa. So again, they're showing you, they're telling you that Africa is the center of everything, the beginning of everything. And then hit it one more time, sis. You're going to see the arrow pointing to a woman in the lower right-hand corner. And what is she doing? She's holding a book. Knowledge that comes out of Africa is now spreading all around the world. Hit it one more time, and you're going to see the woman on the left-hand side of the screen here in the West, in America, is also holding a book, reading from, benefiting from the knowledge which came out of Africa. Next slide. This is a carving above the entrance to the Oriental Institute in my hometown, Chicago. The name of this piece is East Meets West. And what you see is the same concept. Africa, Kemet specifically, the Nile Valley is the origin of culture and civilization. And you see, hit the arrow, hit the button one time, you see a brother holding a papyrus scroll. Again, knowledge, a book, which he has given to the European. He is now receiving the knowledge of Africa so that they can control and dominate the world. Now, if you see something repeated 2, 3, 4, 5 times, somebody is trying to tell you something. And images are the most powerful means of conveying knowledge and information. What did the Chinese say? A picture is worth 1,000 words. So they're telling you very clearly who they are, what they've done, and who you are. You just have to know yourself and act on that knowledge. Next slide. So here are these 3 images. One more time, or hit it 3 more times. So I want you to think about these 3 images in the context of the thief at the U.S. Customs House who has stolen the knowledge out of Africa, brought it into Europe, and Europeans have used that knowledge to control the world. They've been telling us for decades, for centuries, who they are and who you are. Next slide. So this is a mural in the center of the dome of the Thomas Jefferson Building of the Library of Congress. This mural is called The Evolution of Civilization. Next slide. What it shows you are the 11 epochs of civilizations which contributed to the development of the United States of America. It begins with Egypt. And what you see here, hit it 4 times for me, sis. What you see are arrows pointing to Egypt gave the world written records, and you see this European Egyptian holding a tablet, knowledge carved in stone. Below that, you see papyrus scrolls, knowledge written on paper. And then you see the figure that represents America is trying to create something, trying to produce something. He's holding a book in his hand, and he's trying to solve this problem as he looks to Africa as the source of all knowledge. So they understand very clearly that Kemet, ancient Egypt, is the oldest documented civilization known to mankind. 3,000 years of historical documentation, the greatest record of human accomplishment in history, and it's ours. We need to know that it's ours. Next slide. So jumping into the work of our scholars. Next slide, please. Cheikh Anta Diop, who is the scholar supreme. Cheikh Anta Diop said the history of Black Africa will remain suspended in air until, and cannot be written correctly until African scholars dare to connect it to the history of Egypt. It was 50 years ago in July, next slide, 50 years ago in July when Cheikh Anta Diop and his protege, Teofilo Obianga, met in Cairo at the Cairo Symposium to answer the question once and for all, who the ancient Kemites were. And they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were indigenous African people. But that information from that conference was never presented to the general public. The knowledge can be hidden from the world by not publicizing it, by not publishing it, right? Next slide. But Cheikh Anta Diop wrote a book that is critically important for African people to internalize, the cultural unity of Black Africa. He and Teofilo Obianga proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that not only genetically were the founders of ancient Kemet Africans, but the language migrated from the Nile to the Niger, and they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that throughout West Africa, there are elements of West African languages that can be traced back to the Nile Valley. And I will also show you within the history of West Africa, they trace their origins back to the Nile Valley. Next slide, please. Next slide. So a brief timeline, and hit it about 7 times. So what I'm showing you in this brief illustration here, says hit the button about 7 times. I'm making a distinction between Kemet and Egypt. Kemet means the nation of the Black people. Egypt is a Greek word. Pyramid is a Greek word. Sphinx is a Greek word. The Greeks did not come into Egypt until 332 BC. Most of what we know about African people, African history, African culture has been written and expressed by non-African people. So you will never get to the truth by reading their interpretations of our history. I have here images at the top of this slide that shows faces of indigenous African rulers who were responsible for building all of the monuments that people travel to Egypt today to see. And all of these temples and tombs and pyramids were built by indigenous African people before the Greeks came in. And when the Greeks came in, all they did was copy what had already been created 3,000 years earlier. They added nothing new. They added nothing original. So when people talk about Egypt, they're talking about the time from 332 BC on. When we talk about Kemet, we talk about the time frame from 3200 BC until 332 BC. 3,000 years of African excellence and success. That's what we should be focusing on. Next slide, please. Anwar Sadat, when he became president of Egypt, said that he was the first true pharaoh in modern times. His mother was Nubian. He knew that the people classified as Nubians are the descendants of the original inhabitants of this great culture and civilization. Next slide. So briefly, I want to touch on the Asa Restoration Project. Those of you all who know me know that I've spent the last 14 years sponsoring, funding, and participating in archaeological excavations in Egypt. We're the first people of African ancestry in history to fund and participate in an archaeological excavation. Thank you very much. Next slide. So I want to share with you briefly, just a bit, next slide please, a little bit of what we've done. We're excavating on the west bank of Luxor. Luxor, for about 1,200 years, Luxor was the cultural, spiritual, and political capital of the world, We've been excavating the tomb of a priest. It's a 2,700-year-old tomb of a priest named Karaka Men. And we've excavated in that particular tomb 2,700 tons of debris, right? And in this excavation process, we found over 34,000 fragments, pieces as small as my thumb to pieces as big as an automobile. Every single fragment had to be cleaned, had to be labeled, had to be used to reconstruct this tomb. And the next slide shows you a reconstruction of the last part of this tomb. Tedious work, but it's the most important thing I've ever done in my life because it's given me an opportunity to get access to information that I never would have gotten in my life. Next slide, please. So hit it one more time. So these are images of 3 Cushite priests whose tombs we have excavated. Karakimen, Karabashkin, and Nezba-Nedjed. We started off 14 years ago with 3 tombs. We ended our season last year with over 40 tombs. What we found, next slide. What we have found is the largest Cushite settlement in Luxor, Waset. So this is a recreation of Karnak Temple. Karnak Temple is the largest temple complex in the world, larger than the Vatican. And these 3 priests ran Karnak Temple. There's also, hit it one more time, there's also the image on the far right is the image of a young brother named Harem Aket, who was the brother of Karakimen, the younger brother of the brother on the left. He was the chief priest at Karnak Temple, which was the abode of Amen. Have you all heard that word before? Amen. Amen is an couple hundreds of miles south in Sudan. What's important to note is that there are more pyramids in Kush than there were in Egypt. And every single one of the pyramids in Kush had the tops knocked off, were destroyed. Why? Because of a European explorer by the name of Giuseppe Fellini, who in the 19th century came into Kush looking for gold. And he found the tomb of a Kushite queen. And then he wrote a book about his exploits. And in this book, he lied and said that these Kushite nobles buried their gold at the tops of the pyramids. So that caused a swarm of Europeans from France and Germany and England and Italy to descend on Sudan and knock the top off of every Kushite pyramid. Over 300 of these structures, erasing our story. Next slide, please. So during this process of excavating, we found some incredible things. And hit it 2 more times, sis. Every time we find a tomb, this is what's so critically important about this work. Every time we find a tomb, we find the name of an ancestor who was lost to history. And so what we do is what they did. They knew that these tombs were built in order to help the living remember their ancestors. And so there's a statement here from the Book of Ani, a 19th dynasty papyrus that says, pour libation for your father and mother who rest in the valley of the ancestors. The Neteru will witness your actions and they will be pleased. Do not forget to do this even when you're away from home, for as you do this for your ancestors, your children will do it for you. Right? So this process of libation is an African process which connects us to the unseen and brings us together as one. That is the reason why we're still here, brothers and sisters. That's the spiritual connection that Brother Senghor was talking about. Our enemies, our oppressors, lied to us and told us that this was pagan, this was voodoo, this was nonsense. Why? Because they know that if they can separate us from the power of the ancestors, they can continue to control us. We are the ones who have the capacity to reestablish those connections and to be the vessels through which our ancestors will live, breathe, speak, and do their best work. Next slide. So, of all the work that I've done over in Egypt, the most significant event occurred, hit it one more time, sis. The most significant event occurred on September the 28th, 2016, when I visited two tombs right near the temple of Hatshepsut. These are tombs, I'm telling you, will never be open to the public. They will never be open to the public. I was fortunate to go in, to walk through them, to study them. And as Brother James knows, whenever I walk into a space, I'm observing everything. I'm downloading information about everything that I see. And when I looked up, hit it 2 more times, sis. Not just to worship somebody who died, but to study their lives, read their stories carved on stone, so that you can know what they knew and ultimately you can become them. That's what it's all about. Next slide, please. So 2 days, okay. Synthesizing all of this information. I've had some phenomenal experiences over the last 44 years that I've been traveling to Egypt, and more specifically over the last 14 years that we've been participating in this excavation. And I'm at the point now in my life where I can begin to put the pieces of all of this. What I want to present to you, is a theory that is rooted in fact, and I'm pulling together the data now to substantiate this. There were, hit it one more time, sis. The image on the right, the book on the right is a book that was written by a colleague of Sheikh Anta Diop, a brother by the name of Abubakar Lam. The book is called Paths from the Nile. And what it documents are 6 migrations of African scholars, teachers, healers, mathematicians, and astronomers from the Nile River Valley to the Niger River Valley. 6 migrations between 660 BC and 560 AD. And as a result of these 6 migrations, Africans were able to bring their cargo of knowledge from the east to the west and help jumpstart culture and civilization and spiritual traditions and mathematical traditions within West Africa. Now process this. Stay with me for a minute, because I want you all to verify whether or not I'm losing my mind or whether or not I found my mind. If you really understand what this process is all about, what our ancestors knew, and Brother Senghor hit on it. These ancestors knew that there is no death. There is this thing called the Rahimi Misu, the repetition of the birth, and that we come back. And it's important to leave knowledge, to leave documented knowledge for the souls that are coming after you, and more specifically for your soul when it comes back. All of this is for us. So if our ancestors knew that the Nile Valley was going to fall, and they made sure that certain information would not fall into the hands of the coming invaders, and they sent it west to jumpstart civilizations in the west, then they had to have known that those Africans living in the west were going to fall. They had to have known that, and that the Africans and the knowledge encoded within their minds, encoded within their DNA, was going to be brought across the Atlantic Ocean to North America, South America, and every island in the Caribbean. So we are the key. We're the linchpin to this process. Follow this, next slide. So, next slide, one more time. So, the National Museum of African American History and Culture opened 2 days before I made this revelation, right? And what's important to understand about this building is that it represents the concepts that African heroes and sheroes have been talking about for centuries. Sister, hit it 2 more times. Kwame Nkrumah said that we're are African, not because we were born in Africa, but because Africa was born in us. So we need to understand very clearly that we carry the DNA of West Africans and East Africans in our genetic memory. It's more than just physical DNA. We carry the memory of all of these ancestors. And all that we have to do now is to unlock these memories, and we will know what they knew. That's the key. That's why the ability to read, to write, to reason was kept from us, because they knew if we ever came into our right minds, game is over. Game is over. That is the mental reparations that I'm talking about. You don't have to beg anybody for anything because you already got it in you. Next slide, please. One more time, sis. So I'm winding up, but I want to show you what's coming. We got some stuff in the pipeline that we'll be sharing with the DC community in the fall. The National Museum of African American History and Culture. Biden was there today, right? Extolling the virtues of Black folk, talking about the contributions that we've made to America, right? This building, the exterior of this building is called the Corona, which means crown. And the inspiration for this building, next slide, please. The inspiration from this building came from a caryatid, a Yoruba shrine post. David Ajay, the Ghanaian British architect who designed the exterior of this building, was inspired by this shrine post, which has 3 inverted pyramids atop its head. And so the exterior of the National Museum of African American History and Culture is comprised of 3 inverted pyramids, which means if you understand the symbolism expressed in the architecture of this building, if it's modeled after a Yoruba shrine, it means that this building is more than a museum, it is actually a shrine house. It's a shrine house. And if you come into this building with the right consciousness, you can access the ancestors whose spirits are moving in this sacred space. Next slide, next slide. Follow this, follow me. Follow me and understand how the ancestors have been working through these architects to design something that nobody expected them to do. So hit it one more time, sis. I want you to notice the angle of the corona. The angle of the corona is 17 degrees. He designed it to be 17 degrees so that it would match the angle of the pyramidion of the Washington Monument, which is 73 degrees, to show symbolically and metaphorically East Africa and West Africa are the same, are one. Very strategically, he put that symbolism there, and those with eyes to see will see it. Next slide, please. Next slide. So everybody knows this, and if you've done our Egypt on the Potomac field trip, you know that that monument was not actually dedicated to George Washington when Masons opened it in, I think, 1888. It was actually dedicated to a Tsar. And the symbolism is inside of that monument. Take our Egypt on the Potomac field trip, first Saturday of each month, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Go to our website, you can purchase a ticket and have your life transformed. But this next slide, one more time. So the inspiration for the design of the monument and the reflection pool were copied from Karnak Temple. Every temple in Kemet had Tekenu, which the Greeks call obelisk. Every temple in Kemet had a sacred lake or a reflection pool. What's important to note, hit it 2 more times, sis. What's important to note is that this sacred lake at Karnak Temple was built by Shabaka, the 3rd king of the 25th dynasty. Shabaka just happened to be the father of Karakamen and Harry-Marquette. His sons were responsible for managing the most sacred site ever built on this planet. David Ajay, the Ghanaian British architect who designed the National Museum of African American History and Culture, said that at its best, architecture is the physical manifestation of a culture's highest ideals. And what you will see here in Washington, D.C. is Washington, D.C. is copied after the best that the human mind has ever produced. Africa, it's yours, sisters and brothers. Claim it. Don't just drive past it and call it the Washington Monument. Know who it really represents. tap into and draw into your soul that ancestral knowledge that is waiting to be acknowledged. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right, next slide one more time. So my books, Egypt, Potomac, Nile Valley deals with a lot of this information. Next slide, please. So winding down now. Hit it like four times. Hit it, keep going, keep going. One more time, one more time, one more time, one more time. All right, all the images. When I went to Sudan with Renoka Rashidi and saw the Kushite pyramids. The pyramid on the back of the dollar bill is a Kushite pyramid because they have an angle of 23 degrees. So these folk knew who we were, and they copied the best of African spiritual traditions, architectural traditions, in order to create the wealthiest and most powerful nation in human history. Y'all see what I'm talking about? Do you feel what I'm talking about? Next slide, next slide. Hit it one more time, sis. All right, so Arthur Schomburg, who inspired my master teacher, John Henry Clark, wrote an article called The Negro Digs Up His Past in 1925. I urge all of you all to go online and download a copy of that article and read and study that article. The most important takeaway from that article is Schomburg said the American Negro must remake his past in order to make his future. That is where the power is. We should be doing it more than anybody else on this planet because that knowledge is ours. Next slide, please. Hit it 3 more times. So Clark told us what we must do. We shouldn't allow others to teach us. We should teach ourselves. Next slide, as I'm winding down now. We have a project that we'll be unveiling in September. It's called the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project, and it speaks to what Dr. Clark said. If you begin your history with slavery, everything since then looks like progress. So the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project is designed specifically to document 8,000 years of African success and excellence before our world was turned upside down. I often say that if the book of African history was a book of 1,000 pages, the story of our enslavement begins on page 995, and it's only 2 pages long. Our job is to document the first 994 pages of our story. We've got to do that. It's our responsibility. Next slide. So, as I'm winding down, I want you all to get this. This is the most significant thing that I've said this evening. Libation and ancestral intelligence are our superpowers. Everybody's concerned about AI, AI this, AI that. The only AI that should matter to African people is ancestral intelligence. We've got more ancestral connections than anybody on the planet. Hit it one more time. So that ancestral intelligence is knowing that we carry the genetic memory of 10,000 times 10,000 Africans within us. We carry that, every single one of us. And so it's knowing that our ancestors are the geniuses that reside in our genes. We got it all. We just need to embrace it and accept that reality. So it's knowing that when we call our ancestors, they must come because we're the reason that they exist. All right? Understand that we're the reason that they exist, and they are a reliable source of cultural and spiritual reparations. They will never fail you. Next slide, please. So as I end on these next 2 slides, come on, next slide, please. I want the ancestors to speak. And I want us to hear from 3 wise men of the African diaspora. Hit it twice, sis. Dr. A.C.G. Hilliard, my beloved teacher, said that mental slavery is worse than physical slavery because the mental slave believes that he or she is free, never realizing that the shackles are on our minds. Next slide. Bob Marley said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Only we can free ourselves. Only we can free ourselves, and we have everything within us to free ourselves. Next slide, the last slide, is how we began this talk. Carter G. Woodson said, the truth comes to us from the past, and then like gold is washed down from the mountains. So I talked to Brother James about this as I wrapped up and got his permission to put it out here. I want to invite you all here after we're finished this evening to walk with us around the corner to this statue so that we can pour libation and acknowledge these ancestors and thank these ancestors and invite them to be in our lives. When you all come here tomorrow, I want you to end the session tomorrow by walking down to that statue and honoring these ancestors. Do the same thing on Sunday. And whenever you pass that statue, do that. Pour libation to your ancestors. Let them know that they are loved. Let them know that they live in you. And let them know and the world know that you're ready to continue their work. Thank you very much. Please let's give a loud round of applause for our beloved historian, master teacher, Dr. Browder. Thank you so much, sir.
Very briefly, we're going to continue with the program. That's a quick message to ensure that you come back. I have our FOI is on the job right now. We got 3 plates, and we don't want you to get told or to get a ticket. You're parked in a parking spot that is reserved for the residents over here. So it's a New York plate, Nissan Altima is silver, North Carolina plates, Nissan Altima is a darker color, and the last one is a Hyundai Sonata black with the Virginia plate. So if you own one of those 3 cars, please, to ensure you don't get a ticket or toll, let's go ahead and move that. New York plates, Nissan Altima is a silver color. North Carolina plates, it's a Nissan Altima as well. It's a darker silver color, gray. And then the Virginia plates, Hyundai Sonata, black.
And that's what it's all about, to be culturally aware. Let's give it up for Brother Tony Browder again. Wow, that was powerful. Amen. If y'all want any of his books, go to his website, ikgculturalresourcescenter.com. 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 And the book that I like the best, Brother Tony, was the Browder File. But just keep doing your work, you and your daughter, Sister Atlantis, and may God continue to bless you, sir. I'm gonna do a little bit of call and response. Is that all right? Is that all right? All right, everybody say Professor James Small. Professor James Small. Professor James Small. That's his website. So y'all can't miss that. Professor Small is the chief historical consultant of MGM Godfather of Harlem TV movie series starring Forrest Whitaker. I'm not going to read it, brother. I'm not going to read it. I just want to let them know that we love you. Don't we love Professor Small? I'm just going to read one thing. Professor James Small is a scholar, activist, dynamic speaker, as you'll hear, and organizational consultant. He is a CEO of Santa Large Enterprise, Ghana, CEO and president. And y'all know Malcolm X's birthday is tomorrow, right?
Sunday.
Is it the 19th? It's the 19th. Okay, thank you, brother, for correcting me. So this brother's gonna highlight everything, but please remember this last thing. Professor James Small. Here you go. Thank you. Thank you, brother. Yes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings. Now, this year will be the 59th year that we pay tribute to Malcolm's spirit. and to you, my great father. Years. So I got the opportunity to try to teach both tracks. Now I'm kind of like the invisible man because most people didn't know I was a Muslim, during that period of time. Coming after Tony is the most impossible thing anyone could do to any human being. So I left my folder of notes on the chair. Okay. That was extraordinary, Tony. That was an extraordinary presentation. So I want to see what the Spirit is going to ask of me to give to you concerning reparations. But I just want to tell you a couple of things. I just returned from Ghana last week. Some people may have heard that someone, Tony wiped them out. I don't really need it. Someone put a bar and a restaurant in the Elmina slave dungeon. So I wrote a petition and circulated around the world to the presidents. We did a few other things. We put some heat on the government. They feel they've found a resolution to the situation. And on Monday, the government will announce that resolution. Second thing, because Tony laid out so much, and some of this is going to be for our father, America, when I was about 21, I was taking this beautiful young girl, Georgette Miller, to the prom, her prom. But I had no money. 21 in those days, you broke, right? So there was two brothers who always sat in the car in front of our stoop in Harlem, and they were always very courteous to the young guys. So they says, "Aren't you taking Doll Baby to the prom?" I said, "Yes, sir, but I ain't got no money for no tuxedo." They said, "Get in the car." So I got in the car, they drove me to the Bronx, and they rented me a tuxedo and some patent leather shoes. But what happened, I was a Muslim, but they didn't know that because I was like a well-kept little secret. As Imam, I became Hajj Amin Shahid. I went to Mecca around 74, that time period. But the men saw me about 3 weeks later and wanted to make sure that I take the tuxedo back, that I take the shoes back, that I did all the things to make sure their money wasn't wasted. And I told them I did. So I didn't understand that. So I went to Sister Ella, Malcolm's sister. I said, "Sister Ella, why did these brothers treat me that way? And why did they say I was leaving Mecca to go to Mecca?" We're talking about reparations. The Human Rights Charter of the United Nations talk about culture being denied is a human rights violation. Language, indigeneity, being denied is a human rights violation. Religion, indigeneity, is a human rights violation. The history of a people being taught to a people, if you violate the opportunity, you violated their human rights. All of those things are worthy of reparations and have been given to different people across the world in reparations over this last century on one level or another. So we have to understand what has occurred here in this place called America. This is Egypt. The man was telling me, we don't need Saudi Arabia anymore because what Mecca represented then has been built in the US now. You'll understand it. Because I'm also the priest of the craft of Amun-Ra. The priest of the craft of Amun-Ra. I had the opportunity yesterday to be in Houston before that storm hit, and the ancestors got me out just in time, about an hour ahead of it. But I went to perform the opening of the mouth ceremony for the Grand Master of the Shrine of Hunefa. There's a lot that exists among us that we're not aware of. Africans in America, yes. The Europeans damage our consciousness. Consciousness is the ability to restore yourself, rebuild yourself, and reconstruct yourself. Well, you can't do that unless you have access to your memory. Your memory is your history. Your history is your ancestral experiences. And when they blocked us off from our ancestral experiences, that was one of the greatest crimes they ever committed against us. And it is listed in the UN as a crime against humanity. And it makes our case for reparations because we do have to take it before an international legal forum if we're going to get the verdict that we want that would bring about the enforcement necessary to be paid and to be compensated for all of the crimes that have been committed against us. But what I want you to understand is that we did not die in America. Some of us died in America. But all of us did not die in America. Okay? When we see the obelisk that Brother Tony was showing that we call the Washington Monument, it was not coincidental that they put it there. Driving around Washington and seeing the replication of all of these buildings from ancient Africa is not coincidental. They wanted to replicate us, and they've done a pretty darn good job of it. But here's what you miss, and some of them miss. The replication of these physical symbols of the quality and attributes of the character of the African. Let me say that one again. I don't want y'all to miss the last sentence now, because the last sentence is important. Those buildings represents the quality and the attributes of the character of the African. That he does not have the capacity to contain. That's why he keeps us here. We are the light of their world. That's why he keeps us here. He wants to minimize our ability to control power. But you can't have an America without us because we are the source of the power in America. And I want you to really get it, you know, because sometimes we don't really get it. We don't really understand. If you made a list of 200 of the greatest inventions in North America, I guarantee you 75% would be African Americans. But we don't think of them when we stack them all together. We think of the light bulb, we think of the train track, we think of the elevator, we think of, you know, a few things that we do every Black History Month, but line up 100 and see how many was our contribution. Okay. America, when it was founded, was an agricultural society, right? They didn't have an agricultural society in Europe. They didn't go to get us for labor. They went to get us for agricultural knowledge. They had come across all this land. They had gotten as much gold as they could get after a while. They needed us for that too, but primarily this became an agricultural world. And we were the world's agricultural specialists in all fields. That's why we were brought here. Two young girls the other day, they said, young African American sisters, they said they solved the Pythagorean theorem Well, first of all, Pythagorean didn't have a theorem because pi is already reached when we completed the pyramid, off by an almost unmeasurable milliliter. And Pythagoras' great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather wasn't born yet. And so we know in the Rhine Mathematic Papyrus, I think it's problem 16, you could see that worked out. But what those young ladies did was, and they said, well, we didn't do nothing. We just simply made smaller triangles, smaller right triangles, and small. What they did was what education should do for us. There's a reason why people want to control our schools, and it's a reason why people want to control your history. Again, just what has happened to the public school system against the African mind is your case for reparations, right? Because the word education itself means to do what? Bring something inside of you out. The very root of the word means to bring something in, out. So you don't go to there is something inside of you that these tools, when appropriately applied to your consciousness, allow you to bring out of yourself. Before I started saying we're God having a human experience, the Nation of Islam was saying we were gods. Am I right, sir? Okay. Before the 5% nation under Brother Clarence was saying we gods, the Nation of Islam was saying before Clarence left the nation, we were gods. And it took me a long time to get that one. That we indeed are the universe itself. See, there's nothing on the back of my shirt. Jinyami. Naninyami. Nothing exists but God. What are we? Expressions of aspects of that existence. Listen to me, Paul, because I'm not getting away from reparations. It's time to give you something. We are expressions of aspects of the essence of that existence, which means each of us contain the totality of the God's possibilities. They took that away from us. They took our access to that understanding away from us by denying us the tool to extract what comes in us from the universe itself. And that's about this war. Yes, sir. So we at war. Reparations is one of the tools we need to win the war. And when we make this case, as our great attorney, Queen Mother, was making for us, I mean, that's just extraordinary what y'all went when y'all went to Geneva. I had not heard that before. And I'm sitting there going like, we thought we did something. Y'all was like super revolutionaries. And I'm like, oh my God. And our children need to know those stories. They need to know what you did. They need to understand the work that has been done, because a lot of people think reparations is something new. We're just starting it and they're not studying the work that's already been done. The greatest crime that was committed against the African is to take away the African's memories. Now, they didn't take away all of our memories. A lot of us still got memory. But we're not individuals. The African is a body. When the great light wanted to express itself in the world, it doesn't express itself as the great light. We use the sun as a symbol. The sun don't come down, it'll burn us up. So what does it do? It's in tiny little pieces of itself we call sun rays. But each of them contain the totality of the great light. But somebody block you from understanding that, taking that knowledge of replication. How do I recreate myself? Tony was saying that in our culture, there's no such thing as death, and there isn't. We are simply replication. When I gave birth to my, how many children? 8 children. I gave birth to myself. When my mama and dad gave birth to me, they gave birth to themselves. When grandma and great-grandma and great gave birth to them, they gave birth to themselves. We are always a total existence. We are never not existing. But he took away the knowledge of your understanding. No, you are that aspect of God that creates. That's the only way God creates. But to have the knowledge of who you are, see, that's where the nation come in, but you know that better than me. We missed the boat. Even when I was young, I missed the boat on the nation. Of course, I couldn't come in at the point I was because I went over with Malcolm. But I did keep an alliance with so many of the brothers. This thing of the lost knowledge, this thing of the mind, to understand what the white man did to us. He blocked you from an understanding of yourself as a God having experience that we call the human being. Not to make you reign over anything. You don't have to, because you already reign over everything if you were conscious of the fact that you were doing that or should be doing that. African culture is not just wearing kente cloth, dancing to some beautiful drum and music. African culture is what allows the earth, what allows the cosmos the repast. And the ancestors said, you go to the airport. And I listened to them. I said, I'm not coming inside. I'm going to go to the airport a little early. Got to the airport, got on the plane. They wouldn't let us leave. They held us for 2 hours because this crazy storm came through. But when you saw what it did to Houston this morning, about 2 tornadoes followed the storm. Now, I figured Jarvis probably was angry about something we didn't. He just tore up the whole city to make himself happy. But imagine having the ability to control energy without splitting the atom. I hope y'all understand. Y'all don't quite understand where I'm going. Right? That's kind of like out there someplace. I'm matter and I'm energy. If I could collect all of the energy that is me and blow up myself, I'd be a nuclear explosion. To build a robot that can do everything that my body could do with all the cells in my body do it with and replicate those cells every day, you'd need a nuclear power plant. But the sun is our nuclear power plant. The energy we get from the food is that nuclear power plant. Because we're nothing but mud and fire, right? Every bit of food you eat come out of the dirt, right? And what it absorbed, whatever seed universe. We built all that stuff in Kemet not to have something pretty to look at. Those were tools that teach us concepts, ideas, and principles of how to live life in harmony and balance with cosmology and ecology and one another. So there was no war, murder, death, lying, stealing, and destruction that's going on in society. That they cannot replicate. They can replicate the symbols of those things, but they need us to keep America from falling apart at the seams. Every decent law in this country that we can call human rights law of worth, we fought to put it on the books, not them. They don't have the capacity to contain and retain what's necessary to make a civil society. So when we go to war, and I'm gonna close with this, and we take our case for reparations, the case that make it clear that history allows you to erase the mystery. Dr. Hilliard, one of Tony's great teachers and mine, said, the greatest freedom anyone can know, and Mother was talking about identity, is to be shackled knowingly to your identity. The greatest freedom that anyone that can know is to be shackled knowingly to your identity. And he's chopped that chain and unshackled us from our identity. That's why Afro descendants, at first I was kind of like, I want to throw African in there, but I listened to it after the last conference real well, right? And I go like, that makes sense because it includes all of us as we are scattered all around. Our identity isn't just the language we speak. Remember, every language is like a ship, right? It carries the information of that group of people for that time period that were in that location, functioning in that way. See, I would have a contention. I wouldn't contend with Tony because I love Tony too much, but I'm the elder, so I can contend a little bit. That we went from West Africa to East Africa and built Kemet. And when the invaders came, we returned to the ancestral lands and went back to West Africa and rebuilt new civilizations again. And so when we were brought here to this country, and I'll conclude with this, because we don't think of it deeply. You a charter, can you show me one? And no white lodge in America can show a charter from the Grand Lodge of England. None. They have been, the lodge from England set up their lodge, but they can't stand on that. And even if they could, 33 is just walking in the door. Yes, you can't reach 360 until you're laying prone, but you get there at the day you say goodbye and say, I got to transition and come back again. I put this out there for some who hear me. Do you hear me? Those who hear me. Okay? Because we built America. It was never the church itself that was the great force. It was those societies of secrets that African men and women had who ran the church that made it a great force. And those societies never died when they drove us out of Kemet. Every African society retains societies of secret for the men and societies of secrets for the women. And a lot of times, I remember when Sister was speaking, and I remember somebody come up and talk about the power of our women. In African culture, in every phase of culture, in every part of our known history, the women is the power. She gives authority to the men. Hear that well. The women is the power. She gives the authority to the men. That's what that statue where you see of Isis sitting there with Horus sitting on her lap. But remember, also on her head is what? The throne. She is the throne that the male sits upon. And this is practiced in most African society today. You don't find your leader through the male. A few cultures do that, but most trace their leadership through the female, what they call matrifocal. Okay? The women decides who leads these countries. She's the power. She gives us the authority. And because the white man knows that, he's cut off our access from the body knowledge, from the history, from the culture, from the spiritual system, from the sacred science institution that's supposed to protect the spiritual system. And so we can't build the next step, the economic, politics, and cultural institutions that will protect the body people. And if you don't have a consciousness rooted in your own histology, your own spirituality, around your own rituals, around your own race in terms of your projection, around your own ethos, around your own philosophy, then you've got somebody else's that you're spreading. And everybody else's is to your demise. So I love the Divine Nine, and I know some of the Divine Nine is in the room tonight because, of course, I'm in Washington, D.C. And I know today the president spoke to the Divine Nine, some of their leadership. great historical experiences, but genetically, we're the same people. There's only one Africa. That's why Afro descendants make sense. Put it under one label, one Africa. So I'll end with this. History will erase the mystery. To be shackled to your identity is the greatest freedom you will ever know. And part of the greatest crime that was committed against us, to cut the shackles that tied us to our identities and blot the history that restored our memories. So Brother Cyrus, Father said, thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
See, when you speak from the soul, you speak to the soul. And you can tell whenever our dear great elder speaks, he speaks from the soul, because it's something about his words that just resonate with you in a way that activates that Africanity. So we thank you, Professor, for all that you have done and all that you continue to do in the name of truth. Please, again, just give him one more round of applause. Our beloved, our dear, hardworking conductor, Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, could not be here with us physically, but he definitely left his indelible mark on this day, the first day of the Afro-Descendant National Reparations Convention. He has a gift for us. He has a brother that's gonna come up just for a few minutes, Brother Reparations Maximus, the lyrical beast of the Northeast. But before I bring him up, I have to say one thing, brother. I need some help from all of us, because everything is real. You heard the Honorable Silas Muhammad, you heard the Queen, you heard all of these great men and women talk about the over 30-year experience of going to Geneva and fighting on our behalf, even when we was oblivious to the reality. These things are real. They had to really go into their pockets to pay for their expenses, their lodging, the food, every single thing that it took for us to get to this day. So this isn't us asking in the sense that we need you to, but we need you to, because the only way we're going to go to the next level if we are understanding that this is a collective effort. And so if you see it in your hearts, as which we have done, please give a donation. We're going to put, it's already up there, the Cash App, PayPal, please. Your donation is much appreciated and is much needed, because we're past the stage of reparations as being a conversation. It's a full-blown, ongoing reality. And so with that understanding, we can't lose steam now for the small things like making sure that we're able to still be present in this fight so that a legitimate, genuine, authentic voice is being heard on the world court. So please support yourself by making that donation. I had to say that. So please, brothers and sisters, again, I've so much enjoyed everybody. I'm so honored to be in your presence. I'm so grateful to see and touch everyone if I get the opportunity to. Professor James Smalls, Dr. Tony Brown, we're doing libations at the end, so please, at the end, we're going to meet out there orderly, but we're going to have one more speaker. He's 3 to 5 minutes. He's going to bring the house down, the lyrical beast from the Northeast, Brother Maximus. Our gift from the attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz. Yes, sir.
He said the lyrical beast of Northeast. I'm called the oratorical beast of Northeast. I know it's been a long day, but I have to say, excuse me. Excuse my linguistics. Like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I'm about to drop the ballistics. I don't care if you're Toto the Scarecrow, Dorothy, the Wizard of Oz. You better buckle up. I don't mean to brag, I don't mean to boast, but after I drop this bomb, and there's a toast. America, white America. With a gun in your hand, you kidnapped us from our native land. You packed us in ships like sardines, traded us for mere sugar cane and coffee beans. White America did what it pleased, like a dirty vulture. She robbed us from our precious culture to develop a new world. That was their mission, to beat us into submission, to rend our families apart, then steal fear in our babies' hearts. Your founding fathers, just a few men, justified slavery, but not calling us men. You treated us rotten. You forced us to pick the cotton. No accountability. You did as you please. You hang our ancestors from the highest trees, and now you blame us for our lot as you continue to scheme and plot. Me forgive you? I think not. We built your mansions with the trees we saw. You scarred our back. Wild horses to tear us apart. You destroyed our family structure. You sold us in auctions. You forbidden us from reading out of the precaution. You emasculated our men. You raped our women. And you wonder why I'm still fuming? No, I'm not fooling. What type of people will force us to eat on dung and drink on urine? Fast forward down in our communities, you view us all as thugs. You flood our communities with your illegal drugs for our poor to sell, providing us with enough. You insulted when we call you devils, to err as human, to forgive it divine. Maybe that's your mantra, but it is not mine.
I know he said it was the oratorical, but I wasn't too off with the lyrical part, brother. Well, again, I want to thank you all. I believe that, again, I told you the fruit is on it. We have an iPad that somebody left. We got an iPad. If this is someone's iPad that they left back here, okay. Got that covered. We got one more announcement real quick, brother.
Real quick, Brother Malilu Shabazz is so ecstatic. He was looking at it through stream and he said, please meet him tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at 1947 14th Street. That's another aspect of doing economic divestments of Capital One Bank. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Again, we'll be back here at noon, 12 o'clock. Try to get here early. It's an action-packed day. And again, we thank you all. We thank our Creator. We thank our ancestors. And may all of us return to our humble abode safely. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I leave you as I greeted you in the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom alaikum. Peace be unto you.